So the whole program is based on 5 key concepts of wellness and recovery. And those 5 things are hope. Hope is the very first one, and it's basically, hope is different for someone who can't get out of bed in the morning versus someone who's out there kind of living their dream, right? So whatever hope is for you that will get you enough motivation to, get out of bed, that's what hope is. And it can be anything. It can be, the hope that you get just from reading an inspiring book or watching a movie or spending time with kids or hearing laughter. Those kinds of things can be hope for people. And sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes it's a cup of coffee. And sometimes it's something really big, the dream that you'll go to school and get your dream job. So it can be anything. So hope is the kind of jumping off point. I kind of think of it, the idea that you can live a life that you want, So it's the jumping off point. It's the spark. And then from there, the next key concept is personal responsibility. And that is the awareness that, no matter what has happened to me, no matter what has brought me to this place, and lots of times a lot of really bad things happen to us that are so out of our power, they're out of our control. And there's a certain amount of grief and loss that comes with that. And it's okay to be there for a period of time. But when we stay stuck there, we stay stuck, And so personal responsibility is about realizing that I'm the expert on myself, and I'm the one that can choose something different for myself. So I can get back in the driver's seat of my life, and even though, I may not have chosen to be in this place that I'm at, I'm the only one that can change it. I'm the only one that can make different choices to get myself out of this. And it's so powerful when we realize that. So it's about just empowering ourselves, and just realizing that we have the ability to choose a different response to things that have come our way.
Jen, before you move on to the next one, is there anything else you want to say about personal responsibility?
I just think sometimes people hear the word responsibility and they go, whoa, I've got too much responsibility on my plate already. And that's not the purpose of that. It's not about taking on more responsibility. It's about realizing that we are the key to changing our life and going, you know what, here I am. I can make different choices, and I can see things start to happen for me. So it's about sometimes saying no. It's sometimes saying, I'm looking at my life and my situation, and I need to make some different choices. And say no to things so that I can say yes to other things that are better for me.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about personal responsibility because I think that's one of the things in RAP is the acceptance of where everyone is at.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I know for myself, sometimes it can be a challenge to see someone who is refusing or unable to take personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, as a RAP facilitator and as a facilitator who trains facilitators, how do you manage, because I'm sure, we're all human.
Yes.
The urge and that feeling must come up from time to time. How do you deal with that, allowing people to be where they're at?
This we could talk about for days. It's so huge and it's so big. It's really about sitting with the discomfort of knowing that all change has to come from within. So I can talk till I'm blue in the face to someone about, if you eat Fruit Loops every day and McDonald's, you're going to feel like crap. If I keep saying that to someone, I know for myself when I get people giving me advice, unless I've asked for it and elicited advice from someone, that's different. That's kind of different. But if someone gives me their advice, it actually, there's all of us have this kind of rebel in us. So we kind of go, forget it. I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm not listening to you. So personal responsibility is also about us sitting back and just providing, the right climate through providing things like RAP that are educational groups like that without inserting our need to change someone. So to be able to say, to just let go of that need to make a change, which is very, very, very hard to do. It is very hard to do. But I think once we understand that I can tell people what to do, but unless someone feels empowered to make a change themselves, it's not gonna make any difference. So I personally have changed my language around how I even I don't use advice type of language. I speak from a me perspective, so that I talk about how things have worked for me, and then if someone wants to glean something from that, that's their choice. But I don't. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, because I notice. I mean, I have the YouTube channel, and I think it's so common for people who have empathy and people who care. We think that like those nurses who were ripping the Band-Aids off, they think that they're doing the right thing, and it can be so easy to say, well, this is what, I mean, we're outside the situation, so it's easy to look at the situation and go, almost like you're playing a chessboard, and go, oh, well, if you just moved this here, everything would be fixed. But it's way different when you're living that.
Yes, exactly. There is a book that I highly recommend called A Hidden Wholeness by Parker J. Palmer, and the tagline in there is about no fixing, no saving, no setting each other straight. So sometimes we have to look at our own, what's our own agenda in giving advice too? Is it because we want to see a change in someone else so that we feel good about ourselves? Or is it that we don't want to take responsibility for someone else's, situation, so we just kind of tell them what to do and then we can kind of leave? Or, so he talks about creating open spaces where people can find their own inner teacher. And I love that book. It's been so huge, fundamental in my personal philosophy. So we have to learn to sit with our own discomfort of wanting to fix something. I have an amazing story that I can share.
Cool. Can we hold that for 1 second?
Okay,
we'll go to a break, and then we'll bring the story back. So we are speaking right now with Jen Cusick. This is Synchronicity, talk radio for your mind, body, and soul. And we're kicking off Mental Health Week here in Canada with Jen Cusick from Luminate Wellness. We're talking about RAP, which is the Wellness Action Recovery Plan, and we're right in the middle of the 5 key concepts that RAP is based on. And the first 2 we've just covered are hope and personal responsibility. We'll be back with more Synchronicity in just a moment. All right. So sorry I had to cut you off there, Jen, but I had to play that ad. So we were talking about personal responsibility and that urge that so many of us have to give advice, and how important it is for us to sit with that discomfort. And you were just going to tell us a story about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I value the most about my work is that I have opportunity to hear so many amazing stories. And this story is someone who I haven't really met personally, but she has a very, very powerful story. And her name is Pat Deegan, and she is someone who is a pretty major leader in the recovery movement in the U.S., and her story is she lived in a group home, and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And most of us in the general population don't understand schizophrenia very well. And what we do understand about it is very, very negative. And when we hear something about someone having schizophrenia, in general, the general population just kind of writes them off and said, okay, well, that's that. It's not the case. I know a lot of people who have that diagnosis and are able to have really full, fulfilling lives. So that was her diagnosis. And she was living in a group home and was in a really bad state, basically, for a long time. So she would smoke and drink coffee and Coke and things like that, and that's all she did, and never wanted to leave the house. And she had an amazing team of people supporting her, and they invited her to go out with them every day. So they would go on, like, shopping trips or go out or do something fun every day, and every day they would go in and ask her if she wanted to come. Every day she said no. Every day she said no, and this went on for a long time, and she speaks about this when she speaks now. Eventually she went out, and she started to experience, that was kind of the key that helped her to get moving and motivated. And now, if you fast forward to now, she has a PhD in psychology. Wow. And she is a leader in the movement in the U.S. She teaches people. She speaks all over the world. She is a change agent, big time. So I think it's important. I just, wanted to acknowledge the staff, in the home that she was working in, that they just tirelessly asked her. They invited her. They were invitational in asking her if she wanted to participate. And when she said no, they didn't force her. They didn't coerce her. They just kind of let her be, and kept inviting until she was personally ready to join. So I think there's something we can learn about that, is to create the invitation and to create a space where people can feel comfortable showing up. But if they say no, we need to respect that, and we need to respect that, and have hope. We have to hold hope for other people when they don't have hope for themselves, and that can be so powerful. So I find that story so inspiring, that, those people were, she did a ton of work herself, and then also they provided the environment where she was able to eventually, come out of her shell and come out of her this world, this bubble that she had created for herself, because they just invited her.
Oh my gosh. I totally want to give away more of the 5 key concepts, because there were so many of them in that story.
I know.
So are you ready to go to the next,
Sure.
the 3rd key concept?
Yeah, so this 3rd key concept is education. And so education is broad. It's just about learning that we are creatures that need to learn, that we need to be growing. It's about growth and expansion, and what is it that I want to learn about? How do I want to learn about who I am and how I fit in the world? And one thing that's powerful to me about that word, often we think that it's about, going to school and taking classes, and education is so much broader than that. And I'm someone who likes to always find out the why, and I decided to look up the etymology of the word education, and it actually means, the original, I think it's Latin, etymology of the word is to bring forth that which is within. So education is so broad, and it's about figuring out who am I? Who am I? What makes me tick? And how do I get to know this person, that is me? And it's so powerful, I think.
Awesome. And that's part of taking personal responsibility is now that I see that I am capable of taking charge of my own wellness, how do I go about that?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
And so what's the next one?
The next one is self-advocacy. Is that right?
Yeah, self-advocacy.
Yes, self-advocacy. And that is about figuring out what our needs are and learning how to go for it. And I explain when I do rap, it could be something as simple as, advocating for ourselves when we order food at a restaurant that, doesn't come back the way that we want it. Do we just eat it and complain in our minds, or with the people we're sitting at, eating dinner with the whole time? Or do we actually say, this isn't quite the way I wanted it, and send it back? So it can be something as simple as that, or as big as advocating for ourselves with our doctors, with our employers, with family members. So it's about figuring out what my rights are, and also understanding the personal responsibility in that is huge. So if I have a right to say no to things that don't light me up, then I have to respect that someone else also has that right. So I can't be annoyed if someone says no to me, So that's an important piece of the whole puzzle. But yeah, so self-advocacy is just learning how to figure out how to get what we need. Do you have anything to add about that?
Well, I really like the point that you brought up about if we're having self-advocacy, then we also need to respect. I mean, we can feel how we feel about it, but respecting other people and what they're choosing for themselves, again, almost comes back to that self-responsibility and respecting that. I mean, we all have our own personal responsibility. And we all have our own personal needs. And if we want our needs to be respected and our boundaries to be respected, then part of that is also paying the same respect to other people.
Yes. I think that is so huge. Yep. Thank you.
And what's the last key?
And then the last key concept is support. And I could talk about this. I'm actually thinking of doing a webinar just on support and community. It's so big, especially right now. So the idea of support is that we all need connection. We're made to live in community. We're made to need support from others. But we live in a society nowadays that is so isolated. We tend to, we live in these neighborhoods, and how many of us have never met our neighbors, And it's quite different than life was like 50 or 100 years ago. So we stay kind of in our little silos, and it's easy to get away with banking online. You do your grocery shopping online. You order food. A person can kind of stay fairly isolated. But we know that we get lit up when we're around people, when we create a connection with people, when we have that energy exchange that happens when we're with other people. It's so powerful and so huge. But how do we build that? How do we start to see that connection and that support to happen when we live in this culture that really doesn't encourage support and connection? So when we talk about that in our RAP groups, we kind of brainstorm, how can we build connection? How can we sit with the discomfort of maybe like starting up a conversation with a stranger? You know what I mean? Like it's about pushing ourselves a little bit, and also the importance of mutual support. So knowing that it's not just all about everyone else supporting me, but how am I going to support and give back to my community? So it's so important, like that need that for that support and connection, and being a part of the community is so huge. And we hear so many stories about people who, like that story I told you about Pat Deegan, like that support system was huge for her in being able to, come to a place of wellness and health.
And she, I was thinking of that story when you were sharing that about support, because she, at the time when she was being invited, she wasn't able to give anyone support. She wasn't supporting herself. But through that continuous and ongoing non-judgmental and accepting support, now she's able to help so many other people.
Yes, so huge. Like the amount of people she's affected in her life is phenomenal. So I think sometimes when we're supporting others, it can feel really one way, but over time, and just to I think it oh man, we could seriously talk about this for a long time, but just understanding, the piece about grace and just understanding love, the love and connection for other people, and having kind of selfless attitude in it is really important when we're supporting others. And it can just have huge, huge effects. And then once we're at a place when we're able to give back, to be able to give back in that same way is so huge. Well, and it can happen so simply. Like a lot of us have created great connections just, at work or through volunteering, through different things like that, community groups. And I think one of the ways I encourage people to just kind of get in the practice is to start just having a conversation with someone in the lineup at the grocery store, or getting used to, breaking out of our shell a little bit and having that interaction with someone. It kind of starts to warm us up to be able to accept and look for and grow other types of supports.
And I just want to, I totally love the talking to people in the lineup and stuff. And I also want to acknowledge, because I've gone through this myself, and I've been, the last couple of weeks, my mental health has not been very strong. I've been experiencing tons of anxiety and all of that. And now I'm taking the week off as much as I can. I've limited my responsibilities so I have some time to recover. But, I just want to acknowledge how challenging and what a barrier it can be to overcome when you're not feeling well to talk to somebody. Yeah,
it is. That is really huge. And I think it's like baby steps, it's like we do little things at a time, and eventually it starts to compound. But yeah, that's a really important point. I know when I was at my worst, just like getting out of the house was hard enough, But as we I think the main thing is to know and to just be self-aware and to know when it's time to just sit back and take care of ourselves and take that sacred space and just know when to say no, and then to know when it's okay to push ourselves a little bit. And it requires a lot of learning and growing and self-awareness to know the difference between the two. I know for myself there are times when it's time I need to just step back and keep myself kind of in this safe space. And then, I can start to tell when that is not healthy anymore for me, and when I need to, even though I don't want to, when I need to push myself a little bit more and connect with someone, even though I feel like all I want to do is stay home. But that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of practice to figure out, when something is right and when it's not right anymore. But,
yesterday I was on my way to work and I was feeling so low and I'd barely slept and on the, contemplating quitting my job, all of these things. And I knew I've had enough experience with wellness to know when I'm not practicing wellness. But that momentum, when you're in that, when I'm in that negative place, even being aware of, oh, look what I'm doing to myself, it's almost like a body in motion stays in motion, and a body in motion downhill, it takes a lot more energy to turn yourself back in a more healthy direction. But it's really important. All I did finally, after ruminating and all of that, for a while, I was like, no, I am not going to, again, the personal responsibility, because I was thinking about all these external things that were the cause of my mood. And I thought, no, I'm not going to allow those things to let my life break down. So I just thought, well, what's the simplest thing that I can do right now to feel a little bit better? And I started smiling at people passing on the street.
Wow.
And when they smiled back, it felt good, because we had that little exchange. And now that I think about it, that was like a little mini moment of support.
Yes. Yeah. That is profound, because I think sometimes we think we need to go out and, do something huge, to support our wellness. Like we have to go out and, start going to the gym for an hour a day. But when you're like having a really hard time getting up off the couch, that is a ridiculous idea. To try to get her. Well, maybe some people can do it, but most people have a really hard time taking that jump. So I think that what you just said about just trying to smile at someone, it can seem like that's a simple and kind of insignificant thing, but it is huge. It is so profound, because I think it's those small things, and we don't realize how our small choices add up. It's like it really adds up. So you smile, and then the return from that ends up being pretty big. So when we start to do those tiny things, those tiny things, the more we do it, the more they add up. And that works negative, too. So as we do negative things, eventually they'll impact our health, too. But I love that story. That's so amazing.
Yay! And I caught myself, I'm like saying, when you do this, when you do that, I'm like, no,